As we go to the first slide, you will note that the first entry is that I don't feel like I could address this topic to you if I had not been an extern 2 different summers when I was an undergraduate university at Dow Chemical Company, where we took various liquids and gases and under pressure, temperature, catalysts, and rare earth metals, we made plastics with different properties. We took short-chained vapors in the air and also liquids and hooked them together in chains to make the plastics that had very different properties. And the importance of this is that every cell in our body takes nutrients and hooks them together in cellular synthesis like a little factory that this process of hooking small molecules together is called polymerization. And so learning about this at Dow Chemical Company was at a time when this wasn't in textbooks and has been of great benefit the next 39 years that I've been focused on the power of more comprehensive nutrition. Mentioned as we started out that I don't think I could really share with you with any understanding if I had not been an extern for Dow Chemical Company. And the importance is that our cells are tiny little factories that, depending on the gene that is activated, different types of nutrients are hooked together for structure function molecules that are compounds that carry out the biochemistry and physiology of life. And we're talking about the composition of cell membranes, various tissues in the body and the organs, even circulating molecules that have activity that the cells can respond to that are called cytokines, cyto being cell, kines for kinetic energy. Cell activators is what that word means. And then hormones influence the rate at which compounds go in and come out of different cells. And then albumin is in the serum, and there are other bioactive molecules that are produced in cellular synthesis. Now, to emphasize that the New Eden dietary supplement that we have developed over 39 years contains ingredients that bind to and neutralize charged free radicals or outgassing of the monomers and the plastic nanoparticles that are put together in modern plastic production. And when they begin to break down, they make little tiny, tiny particles that are chains that are similar to nutrient molecules. And the composition of our New Eden contains cysteine, that's an amino acid that has a sulfur molecule with hydrogens that are present in cruciferous vegetables and is the rate limiting enzyme or amino acid that produces glutathione. And this compound binds to free radicals that are these nanoparticles from plastic essentially mimic. Also, the ace-mannan of the aloe leaf gel also binds to such free radicals. And in the New Eden, there is the tetrasar bentonite clay that's been described to me as like millions of little mouse traps that can bind to and capture free radicals that come from plastic particles and other compounds that can attach to membranes within the cell and alter their function. And also, the worst thing about these free radicals, whether they be nanoparticles or other metabolic products, particularly produced by the mitochondria, that they can attach to DNA and alter the information for cellular synthesis. Also, the cherry powder and the rice bran contains molecules in it that bind to these nanoparticles that can be deleterious to the health. And this nano-sized particles can be inactivated by these ingredients that are in New Eden. Now, I want to point out that the number one plastic on planet Earth is polyethylene. And ethylene is actually made by cells, and it's two carbons with four hydrogens hooked to it that make up the ethylene molecule. But if you take this gas and put it into a reactor, which we will get to eventually, these carbons hooked up in length by pressure, temperature, catalysts, and rare earth metals that modify the way in which the chains hook together so that you can have thin, transparent plastic like you use in the kitchen, or either you can have very rigid, like to make glasses or pitchers to hold liquids, or containers that are molds. This is ethylene gas is a common monomer that is not only used in industry, but is made in the cells, and it's can be identical to the chains that make up amino acids, fatty acids, and even carbohydrate saccharides that are made in metabolism or utilized in metabolism. But these ethylene chains are formed by pressure, but after you've utilized them, they break down into particles, which we call nanoparticles, that are the size of amino acids, fatty acids, and the saccharides. And this causes problems because the structure is not the same as the amino acids, the fatty acids, or the carbohydrate saccharides. And this causes alterations in health. This is how in the body, ethylene, particularly, and it's also in plants, takes the amino acid methylene and through metabolism, which includes energy input from adenosine triphosphate, which is the molecule that provides energy for metabolism in the body. And you see there the compounds, intermediate compounds, that eventually come down to ethylene gas. And this gas is made in plants from amino acids, and it functions in the flowering and the blooming and the ripening of various fruits, such particularly bananas and apples come to mind. But and the ethylene gas itself is not a real problem, but it's the nanoparticles that come from the plastic of hooking these chains together. And this gives you an example of the plant at, say, Dow Chemical Company, where the pure ethylene gas is sent into the reaction chamber, and you have these different steps that the ethylene gas makes a fluid, and then with, again, pressure and steam and catalysts that, as you see to the far right, these carbons are hooked together in long chains to make plastic. And the longer the chain is, the more rigid it is, and the shorter the chains, the more flexible it is. But once it gets into the environment after it's been used, these chains begin to break down, and that's where we get into the nanoplastics that mimic the amino acids and the fatty acids and the carbohydrates And this causes potential problems because they are not the metabolic product that the cell utilizes, and it causes disruption in the metabolism. And fortunately, the New Eden dietary supplement that we stress contains multiple ingredients that I listed for you that can bind to these fragments that are nanoparticles that mimic metabolic products in the cell. We break at this point, and now, because of the short attention span of people, uh, we point out that plastics really started in the 1950s worldwide, and about 82 million tons of plastics were made in the first years. But as the years have progressed, there's up to millions of tons of plastic that are released into the Earth's environment annually. This has increased 230-fold since 1950. And this plastic breaks down into microscopic particles of nano size, which will eventually try to give you an idea of this size. And these plastics are in the ocean, in the rivers, and in lakes. And it causes problems with ocean plants, with algae metabolism, and it gets into animals and then humans that confuse, you might say, the cells in their metabolism because they mimic the small structure of the nutrients that are processed by living cells. These nanoplastics are not metabolically active and can bind to structures inside the cell, much like free radicals that alter the membrane function. And of course, the worst is to attach to nucleic acids or the chromosomes or the genes and alter the instructions there, because the atoms in each of these chromosomes carry is a code to carry information, and these nanoparticles alter that code. And the worst alteration is called a mutation, and it requires mutations to make cancer cells. Now, this is just a graph to start out in the 1950s at the bottom up to the year 2000, how plastic production is a massive industry worldwide. And unfortunately, there's the temporary use of these polymerized chains, and it becomes international trash in, as I pointed out, the ocean and rivers, and it gets into the soil and gets into the water. And it's a threat to all cells, both plants and animals, because these little particles mimic and are the same size as metabolized cells in cellular synthesis. This is just a picture of a canal in India that a boat is just in the middle of millions of pieces of floatable plastic. And I want to point out that research is active to try to recycle some forms of this mass of plastic that is being disposed of worldwide, and is a real challenge to our health of plants and animals, which include humans. And the effect of sunlight and hot and cold causes breakdown of these long chains into the small particles that were originally hooked together in the polymerization process to make plastics. This is a world map produced by the World Health Organization that points out the plastic pollution worldwide. And a lot of this plastic pollution is that the countries that are more advanced ship plastic to these third world countries where they go through it and try to find things that are of some value. But in the United States, they say about there are 10 grams of plastic produced per citizen. And the darkest countries have over 1,000 grams each year that are plastic that are in their waterways and gets into their soil and even gets into the air because they're such small products. Remember, we started out making plastics from gases and also liquids, so they can really integrate into the environment. Now, this is an attempt to try to get across to you the size of nanoplastics. We have a button there that's about 1 centimeter in diameter, and you can see it with the naked eye. And then you get down to things that you would take a magnifying glass to see them, but you can see them with the eye. But then you get down to microplastics that are about a 1 micrometer, and you can only see them under the microscope. But when you get down to the nano size at the very bottom, it is the size of the chromosomes are the size of molecules that are active in cellular synthesis to be hooked together to assemble bioactive compounds. And of course, these plastic particles, pardon me, which are so small, don't function like amino acids, fatty acids, or carbohydrates. They're extremely small and they mimic these molecules that are utilized in cellular synthesis or the nutrients. And of course, the plastic particles are not nutrients. At this point, we break again and we go to the next slide that the health threat of nanoplastic particles, there are over 16,000 chemicals, of which 4,200 are highly toxic that are in plastic. And there have been over 3,600 published studies around the world about the problem of nanoplastic particles. And we mentioned before, we used as an example ethylene gas because polyethylene is the most common plastic. And you use industrial ethylene gas that comes from the petroleum industry to utilize in the industry to make plastics. And this individual ethylene molecules are actually made in plants from methionine amino acid that I showed you the steps that's involved in the life cycle of fruits and vegetables in blooming and maturing, particularly in bananas and apples in regard to their becoming ripe. Now, the nanoparticles are taken into the human body by eating, drinking, breathing, and skin tag. And in fact, wet, sweaty skin increases the intake of nanoparticles that actually can get into the serum and be circulated around to the cells and cause confusion in cellular synthesis. They find these nanoparticles in atherosclerotic plaques, and there's been some implications that premature births are caused by nanoplastics in the mother that gets involved in the cellular synthesis to develop the new embryo. And again, they're not amino acids, fatty acids, or carbohydrates, and it causes an abnormal development, and the uterus rejects it, and we have a stillbirth of primarily a bloody material and great disappointment for the couples that thought they were going to have a child. But nanoplastics are implicated in some of the premature birth material. But these nanoparticles alter metabolism, the endocrine function for making hormones. They interfere in the reproductive cycle, not only of the development of the embryo, but in ovulation. They get incorporated in the egg as well as in altering the metabolism of sperm. When nanoparticles get into the brain, this causes problems of particularly depression and foggy thinking or the thing, and it interferes with growth cycles in the teenage years, causes mental problems, developmental problems, and it actually causes alterations in all the functional organ systems of the body. The plastics are a source of oxidative stress that we've tried to mention before. They act like free radicals, and that again, I've given you the ingredients that are in New Eden dietary supplementation that are preventive by binding to these free radicals so that you won't have oxidative stress among the cells. And this oxidative stress that nanoparticles can cause are very important in diabetes, in cancer, and in dementia or functions of the brain being altered. Now, there are activities in society to try to reduce the use of plastics in food wrappers, in containers, in utensils, bottles, and bags. Legislation is pending in many countries to ban single-use plastics to try to reduce the trash that's being produced worldwide. The plastic industry employs a lot of employees, so that's a lot of voters. And unfortunately, in starting plastic companies, actually subsidies from state governments and federal governments are offered as tax breaks to get the industry going. And this is counterproductive to efforts to try to reduce the plastic pollution of the planet. Now, 50 plastic plants were built since the year 2000, and they've received over 9 billion in tax breaks and subsidies, and nearly all of them violate air pollution standards, which are eased by local governments because they like the taxes and the employment and the spending of the employees in their local areas. Only 4% of the plastics in the United States are recycled at this time. And you may have noted in some of the hardware stores that they recycle some of the plastics to make boards, primarily for outside use in fences and attachments to the house that you put your lawn chair and enjoy the outdoors, that they're very resistant to the weather. And the plastic industry is the sixth largest industry with over 1 million employed in the United States. So that's a real problem. Now, there are opposition actions against the plastic industry. If you probably noticed in grocery stores, nearly all of them have reusable shopping bags to try to reduce the number of plastic bags that you use to take home groceries. They are seeking to reduce the putting plastic in dishwashers or microwave ovens because the heat in the dishwasher and in the microwave oven causes outgassing of these monomers that are hooked together to make the chains for the plastic. There are efforts to try to get people to buy glass and metal snack and food containers in the grocery stores and to put in your refrigerator rather than plastic containers. They're advocating beeswax cloth as an alternative to plastic wraps in kitchens, and also aluminum foil. They suggest that you use wool balls for drying sheets and washers instead of the sheets of plastic that have a chemical in them to reduce wrinkles and improve the quality of your clothes in the dryer. There are efforts to stop refillable cups at places that sell coffee and liquid drinks. There in some states, they're having reusable straws that are not made of plastic. And as we mentioned before, doing away with plastic bags in grocery stores. And there are different efforts to try to stop people from throwing plastic bags or containers alongside the highways and exposed to the sunlight and the temperatures of the environment. Now, the plastic industry has a public relations program that tries to alter society's effort to reduce the exposure to nanoparticles of plastic. But that the plastic industry point out that the quality of life is improved by uses of plastics. And the plastics are very closely related to different products, refining of oil. And so the efforts to reduce our dependency on oil and natural gas is considered to also alter and increase the price of plastics. And there's a conflict there. And as we pointed out, that the number one plastic is ethylene, and it comes from the petroleum industry. The anti-plastic coalition that is part of the Go Green movement that some relate as being an insane project, that going green doesn't influence the weather, and there are different sources of data that are collected that are both sides of this controversy, that it's stated that plastics increase greenhouse gases in the environment, and that's a charge that's made, and that everyone should be opposed to this. Well, they also point out by the plastic industry that the plastic film handles food better with less waste than some of the other types of efforts that you may exert. And that points out, the plastic industry says that we have better health and lifestyles because of plastics, and that plastic makes life better. Well, the more and more the problem of nanoparticles that come from plastic is coming to light worldwide, because it alters human biochemistry and physiology, as we point out before, by it can produce free radicals that attach to membranes in the cell and to the mitochondria, and that they're the same size, and it's not often realize that the carbon base skeleton of amino acids, fatty acids, and saccharides all come from the process of photosynthesis, where the carbon in carbon dioxide the carbon atoms are hooked together to make the skeleton chains that are at the center of the structure of amino acids, fatty acids, and also the carbohydrate saccharides. And that their bioactive compounds like hormones, interferons, and cytokines, that these nanoparticles are the same size and cause alterations in the cell metabolism because the nanoparticles are not hormones, interferons, and cytokines, but the cell doesn't know how to handle it because it's just the same size. So it is an unsolved socio-political, business, and financial world challenge. Constraining mechanisms are being considered by the United Nations and in world capitals. The industry really is doing significant research to try to make plastics recyclable and if nothing else, to deteriorate in the sun rather than to produce nanoparticles, which cause health alterations in the manner which I've tried to share with you, that they're the same size of the tiny particles utilized in cellular synthesis to make bioactive compounds that run the biochemistry and physiology of life.